This is very exciting because you guys know Dia already. She was here for the first Little-Big Bible Studies episode ever. She basically helped establish this series, and now she's back wearing orange and looking great.
Looking like an orange, the fruit.
And yeah, we're just excited. We're going to be studying Abraham and Sarah, formerly Abram and Sarai, because their names were changed. And this story is pretty interesting. It has lots of drama, which
they all do.
They all do. I mean, gosh, it seems like you can't. I don't know. It's not a Bible story without drama.
Yeah.
A synopsis about Abraham and Sarah. So we learn that Abraham was taken out of his homeland. Him and Sarah, their names were previously Abram and Sarai. Abraham was made a promise by God that he would have a host of descendants. He would have all these children, right? But his wife was barren at the time. Then he's promised that he will be given Isaac. He will be given a son. And they are given a son, but it's a lot of waiting, and there's a lot of kind of confusion that happens beforehand, which is that Sarai tells Abram to sleep with her maid or her servant, and then he has a child through Hagar, the servant. So there's 2 children that are born from Abram, but the promise is brought through Isaac, the son. Later, we learn that Abraham at that point is told, I don't know when his name changes, but anyway, Abraham is told to sacrifice Isaac, to kill him. But God provides a ram in place of Isaac, because Abraham is so committed to God that he does in fact go to kill Isaac and
raises the hand,
is ready to slaughter him, and then God says, here's the lamb who's going to be the sacrifice in place of your sons.
I just read Genesis from the very beginning. And so as they are giving like the lineage of Jesus, they also give the age of all of these people that they're talking about throughout the lineage. And during this time, people lived a long time.
Like 700 years.
Like I heard as many as 900 years.
It's wild.
And some of them were having children way like in their hundreds. Like it would say they had this son and they lived 200 more years. So this promise that he made to Abraham for him and Sarah, it wasn't that. I've always looked at it as like, oh my gosh, they were so old, it was a miracle. I don't know if that's the context of it, because people were having children so up in age, so later in life, and living so long.
Good point.
So it's almost like Sarah, which also could illustrate a different meaning, because Sarah's not having that faith was kind of like, well, this has happened for other people around you.
Yeah.
So why would you think that God wasn't going to see that promise through? I think you can interpret it 2 different ways. That was just, I've always interpreted it as, oh my gosh, like God blessed her with this miracle. She had this baby at this age, because today people aren't having babies that old. But during that time, people were living centuries and living centuries after they had children. So I think that's like important and interesting to note. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think there is importance to context. You're right. We aren't used to people living to be 900 years old. But back then, it was, in some cases, normal. So maybe it's not weird that they had a child over the age of 100. Today, we'd be like, that's crazy. But I think it's beautiful in that way of, like, how we're told that the Bible is timeless and applies to every generation. And so it offers us, like, 2 different perspectives and meanings of like, if God takes a while to fulfill something he's promised to you, it doesn't mean it's not going to come true. And I think the other meaning you can interpret from it is like, don't have small faith. If you've seen God do this thing in other people's lives, why would he not do it for you as well? So it just gives us, context can give us just other perspectives.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Really good point. So then there's 2 women, 2 children living with Abraham, causing friction. Sarah sees Ishmael doing something to Isaac, taunting him or something, and she's upset, and she's like, I'm not going to stand for my child being treated this way. He's the promised, whatever. And God tells Abraham to listen to Sarah because she says that she wants Hagar and Ishmael to be sent away. And God I think, tells him, yeah, that's your wife, listen to her. And so he gets up early the next morning, and I think he packs them some food and sends them off on their way.
If I'm not mistaken, though, I think they had to leave for God to fulfill the promise he made to Hagar.
Oh, that would make sense.
Because
that would make sense.
I wish I knew exactly where it was, but you all can fact check us in the comments. I think the promise was something like he would give Isaac a nation of his own. Mm-hmm. So that would have made sense. He would have had to
He can't be.
Because the nation of Abraham was going to be established through Isaac.
Yeah.
So Ishmael would have had to have gone somewhere else for God to fulfill that promise. So it wasn't cruel per se. I mean, it was, but it wasn't. There was a purpose behind it.
I'm really glad that you brought that up because it actually also leads me to the idea that sometimes God needs to move you out of a place in order to fulfill a promise to you.
Woo!
And
that's a tough one.
That's a tough one because at the beginning of the story, we also learned that Abraham's cousin, I think it's his cousin or his relative.
His nephew.
Lot. They were sharing territory at one point, but then there was quarreling between Lot and Abraham, and between their servants were quarreling, and just kind of...
They were both shepherds, or they had like the same occupation.
Okay.
And so they were fighting over that.
So there was disruption, and basically, I think it was Lot was like, or was it Abraham was like, I don't want this to be an issue.
It was Abraham.
Okay.
He was like, if you go to the left, I'll go to the right. Or if you go to the right, I'll go to the left. But basically, he was like, we don't have to fight over this. Like, you can have your own land for you and your shepherds, and I'll have my own land for me and mine.
Yeah. It's in Genesis 13, if you guys want to look it up. It says, Genesis 13:5. Now Lot, who was traveling with Abram, also had flocks, herds, and tents, but the land was unable to support them as long as they stayed together, for they had so many possessions that they could not stay together. And there was quarreling between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At that time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were living in the land. So Abram said to Lot, please, let's not have quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, since we are relatives. Isn't the whole land before you? Separate from me, if you go to the left, I will go to the right. If you go to the right, I will go to the left. As I was reading Genesis 12, 1 through 3, where Abram is originally called to the land of Canaan, and he's, again, brought out of his homeland, separated from everything that he knows, his relatives, his family. And I feel like it's interesting because the Bible often says, even in Genesis, even in the beginning with Adam and Eve, he says like the man must leave his family and cleave to his wife. And so I think that sometimes like it is a part of the plan to be separated from your family of origin in order to fulfill purpose. And I also just thought it was really interesting that Abraham was a decorated soldier. Like he wasn't leaving behind nothing. He was leaving behind a legacy. And so he was being called to something completely new. And I think it would have been very easy for him to be like, why the heck would I leave?
I'm good
here. People know me. They love me. They celebrate me. He did have to, he left behind something really great, but he left it behind for something greater. He just didn't know that yet. It was an unknown and it was uncomfortable. And I think that sometimes God needs us to be uncomfortable to use us. I mean, yeah, I hate being uncomfortable, but I feel like
we don't move if we're not uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Usually that's when we grow.
Yeah.
Or we are able to make pivots or big, meaningful changes in our lives is because we're uncomfortable in the current season or circumstance or whatever it is, and that like propels you, motivates you, pushes you to do something different.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. So what did you think about the story of Abraham and Sarah? Was there anything that stuck out to you in particular this time reading it that maybe hadn't in the past?
Well, yeah, I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me was like the age realization of like, oh, people were living a long time back then and having kids much later in life, which also kind of just, I'm getting up there in age, and sometimes I feel like I don't want to say that I'm behind, but there was a world in which I thought I would be a mother at this point in my life, and I'm not, but I am starting to see close friends and family and people that are younger, even younger than me or my age, having children or on their second child, third child, whatever. And I'm like, dang, how old am I going to be? Am I going to be a mother?
Yeah.
Am I going to be an old mother? Which there's nothing wrong with that. People have, whatever path. But this just kind of made me think, like, it made me realize that the idea of having children so young in life at 20 or whatever is rather nuanced. Like, that was not what was happening back in these days. And in fact, people weren't even getting married that young. Like, I think they were in their, like, 40. One of them was 40 or something when they got married.
Yeah.
And so, for me, it was just a reminder that, like, time is so subjective. It's not this one size fits all thing. So that stood out to me. It's such a good story about so many things, about trusting God. Like you said, Abram had a really good life, and then was, forced to change and move. And so often in life, like, we have to make pivots, and that's not always easy, and it's always a huge act of trust in something that you can't see or you don't know how it's going to turn out. All you know is what is familiar to you. So I think that's always a good takeaway from this story, along with, like, God not allowing his promises to go void. Like, he always fulfills them, no matter how long it takes. The other thing one new thing that I didn't realize until doing this study this time, God's covenant from generation to generation was and is different. And I think sometimes in, like, modern day Christianity, we cling, like, really closely to the covenants that were made with these early day lineage of Jesus. And I don't know, it made me more curious to explore, like, what is actually the most recent covenant that God has made with mankind, and what does that look like? I got into a good discussion with my mom a few months ago about covenants, because she had said to me that she made, like, a personal covenant with God. And I was like, how do you do that? And she was like, well, I, took something to God in prayer, and I said, like, if he did this thing, then I promised that I would do that thing. And I was like, well, I don't know if that's how covenants work. For me, I'll just speak for myself. I think sometimes I can read certain things and it's like, well, that doesn't happen in my life. And I think that's where doubt comes in, when it's like, because it's a letdown of expectation. But it's like, what has God actually said to me? And I think that's why our relationship with God is so unique and personal, because what God has called and assigned you to is not what he's called and assigned me to. I can't look at your life and say, oh, well, God is fulfilling or his task or his promise Aaliyah that thing, so it is for me too. Like, I don't I don't know. But the word does say things like, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and everything will be added unto you. Like, that is, I think, a promise, But I think
because I've also experienced feeling like God has spoken a thing to me, and then going to other people and wanting their approval or their input, right? But they weren't there when God spoke it to me,
right?
But then I also know in scripture that it says there is safety in many counselors, or and
wise counsel,
something like that. wise counsel, key, not just any type of counsel, but wise counsel. And so I have I'm trying to figure that out right now in my life, because I have mentors, people that I'll go to. Even she's a former Bible study leader of mine. She lives in Washington. We've been like talking every week on the phone, and I do bring a lot of things to her, right? Because she is someone I consider very wise, someone I trust. And I would trust her input on a thing. However, there are things that God speaks to people individually that is for them and for them alone. I don't know. Like, I remember sitting in on a meeting one time, and this woman was talking about how she doesn't share anything with her husband until God tells her to. And I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, you don't share things with your husband unless God tells you to? Yeah.
I think I live on a little bit of the opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Because I am someone where, whether it's something I feel like God has said to me or just in general, I don't like to get a lot of counsel. I don't even know if counsel is the right thing. I don't normally share it far and wide, because I often find that clouds my judgment a little bit.
Yeah.
Because then I'm like, I have the voice of so many other people.
Totally.
Where's my voice, you know? So sometimes I like to just talk to God about something, pray about it, and then once I feel like I have a good inkling of where He and I stand on it, then I'll invite other people into the fold if I feel like I need it. But it can be tricky. Like, it is a line to like be conscientious of, because here's what I'll say. I think seeking wise counsel, I think that applies when it is an area that you don't have experience in, and or it's a part of your faith where you haven't seen God yet. And there's someone in your life where like you've seen God move in this way, or you know they have a direct testimony to it. I'm like, oh, that's wise counsel to seek, because this person has walked this thing that I'm trying to walk. Like, if it's very similar, or if like I know that they know the word concerning God and this thing, that's when I'm like, okay, let me seek wise counsel. If it's an area of my life where I've seen God show up in the past, then I'm like, okay, I'm not exercising my faith and my trust in God. I'm like looking for the validation somewhere else, rather than remembering that the same God that was yesterday is today and will be forevermore. And I think the example I can use is my health. Like, I am someone who has struggled with my health in different ways for over a decade now. And I've literally seen God work miracles and with my health. And so when something pops up, it's like, it might stress me out or like affect me at the onset of it. But that's not something where I'm like, oh my God, Aaliyah, I'm so stressed out. Like, what do you think? What do you think I should do? Like, that's something where I'm like, I'm going into my prayer closet and I'm like, God, I know that you have the power to heal me. You've done it before.
Right.
If it be your will, like, heal me again.
Right.
And I am fasting. I'm praying. Like, I know how that thing works with God over me and in my life. Yeah, I think that's something that I could be wise counsel for somebody else for.
Right.
But that's not something that I'm necessarily seeking wise counsel out. On the flip side of that, I've never been married before. So when and if that presents itself, I would love to seek the wise counsel of my pastor or other married couples, because this is an area that they've partnered with God on already, and they have wisdom to offer.
Right. That's really good. I think that you brought up a good point about, because you've been kind of tested and tried in an area, you would be the wise counsel in that area, particularly your health. I think for me, transparently, I have some trouble sometimes trusting myself, and so I think that is why I will tend to refer myself out.
I like that. Give yourself a referral.
I refer myself to counsel quite often. However, there are areas where I feel like God has tested me or tried me, and there I've seen fruit and I've seen how He's grown me or made me more wise in an area. One of them would be my faith with my dad. Is a situation where, I, for a long time, I thought that I had to be the one to get my dad off the street, and I would be the one to, I don't know, I thought, you know, he'll do it because he loves me, right? He'll change because of me. We don't have the power to change people's like hearts, minds, spirits. I mean, I think love is powerful, you know, and what we can do, what's in our power is to love people, and we hope that they will change for the better. But I've learned that that situation was not in my power to begin with.
And you've been wise counsel to me in that area of life, you know? Like, even following the last time that we did this Bible study, I feel like you and I had a Bible study after the Bible study that unfortunately you all didn't get to see. But you were wise counsel to me on, like, that thing. So it's like God tests our faith and tries our faith in different areas, I think, according to our call and our assignment. And so we do have wise counsel to offer, and we can seek wise counsel for others. That's why we all go through our own trials and tribulations, because you're supposed to share that with other people to uplift and encourage them. So yeah, like wise counsel serves a purpose for sure.
And I think Coda might be joining us. No? She's just been sleeping out there.
Adjusting.
But yeah, I mean, and I think also vice versa, Dia, you're a very like patient person. I feel like I've come to you with situations and I'm ready to like make a decision immediately. I'm ready to kick this person out of my life, okay? I'm ready to do some type of action. But Dia is someone who's very like, I would say you have like the ability to be long-suffering. You have the ability to be patient. You have the ability to see things from multiple angles and perspectives and be like, okay, well, hold on. Like, we do know this person beyond this moment. That's something that I've witnessed, like being friends with her. And so I get wise counsel from her in that way, because obviously I can't just be popping off making decisions. Okay?
You can, but with consequence.
With repercussions.
The other thing that came up was, I think you can't talk about Abraham without talking about Isaac. God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. And
oh gosh, how did that even not... That's like a huge part of the story.
And I mean, we see that like God fulfilled this covenant to give them Isaac. And this is the second time that God has asked Abraham to like leave something or let something go or make a sacrifice. And what really stands out to me about Abraham was that he wasn't doubtful. He didn't really question God. He just kind of did it. And that isn't true for everyone in the Bible. Like, we see some people struggle, and like,
for sure.
Again, that's why I think it's such an individual thing, because God knows how to speak to each of us in the way that he created us. But with Abraham, that wasn't his struggle. And so we get to see someone who is just of like focused and like one-trackedness on what God says he just does, no matter what it is, the ultimate sacrifice. And because of his faith, like, God spared Isaac. I don't think God was ever going to kill Isaac, to be honest, but he did test Abraham to see. And I think sometimes, in like boiling that down in the context of our lives present day, I think sometimes we can make idols of things that we really want or desire, and that making that thing an idol is the exact thing that will prevent you from having it. And I think God gave Abraham and Sarah Isaac at a time when he knew they wouldn't make an idol of being parents or having a son, and they could handle that thing. And so something I'm learning in my life is like, when I really value something, not to like hold it so closely, but to be willing to sacrifice it and surrender it, and just know that like, if it's for me, God will let it be for me. And if it's not for me, it may sting a little bit, but like, God has something else for me. And so I'm always just reminded of that in the story of Abraham and Isaac.
One thing that came up for me when you were talking about how Abraham would just do what the Lord says, I thought about, and I'm going to fact check this for you guys, but I think on both occasions when he was told to let Hagar go or send her away, and when he was told to sacrifice Isaac, he did it early in the morning. I'm pretty sure scripture says that he got up and he did it early in the morning. And that's like, to me, that's mind-blowing because, I think that sometimes there's a procrastination that comes along with doing what the Lord has told us to do, whether it's like we're not sure if that's his voice, or we just don't want to do it, or we're scared or whatever. But like the fact that he got up early, just shows a level of dedication and love that he had for the Lord. And then also you talked about, you said you didn't think that God would actually sacrifice Isaac, but it was more about the idol. And I think that is so true. I agree that I think that was a demonstration for Abraham to sacrifice the idol in his own heart. I don't think it was about putting Isaac to death, but really to put the idol of it to death, because it could have easily turned into one, because him and Sarah had waited years and years and years for this promise, and for it to finally be, their reality. They're probably so excited. They probably love their boy. They probably kind of worship him in a way, because he's everything they've ever wanted. So I think that was like a demonstration of him sacrificing the idol of Isaac that he could have turned into.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I like the way you put that, making the idol die. A demonstration of that. Yeah, it's so true. Sometimes I think, like, I'll speak for myself. Sometimes I think God waits until, like, I don't care about a thing anymore. And then he's like, okay, you can have it.
Here you go.
And I'm like, cool, I guess.
Thanks, God.
Yeah. But that's why, I think. It's because if he gave it to me, like, when I wanted it the most, I would make an idol of the thing.
Totally. Like, how do these people point us to Jesus?
Okay, I'm trying to make this quick.
I know.
Sarah points us to Jesus because I think she's an example of what not to do. I think Sarah, I know, I hate it, but I think in Sarah's case, and this is just my interpretation, you can have a different one. My interpretation is that Sarah makes her life, her husband's life, and her children's life a little bit more complicated by not waiting and trusting God and taking things into her own hands. So I think we can look to Sarah's example and just be reminded that if we're waiting on God to do something that he promised us, or even we think he promised us and we're questioning, instead of trying to manipulate the situation to work in the way we think it's supposed to, wait on God. Like, turn back to God. Ask him, is this what you promised me? Did I hear you correctly? If so, like, show me that it's going to be so. Like, clearly, obviously, abundantly. And just having, like, faith, just trusting that God isn't a God that he would lie. So if he truly did promise you something, he don't need your help. He doesn't need you to find a surrogate to help get you the thing. So I think that's how Sarah points us to God. And I think Abraham is honestly kind of the same. And he's what you do. They really are opposites, because Sarah doesn't just listen to what God says. She listens, she hears it, and she's like, okay, I heard you say that thing. I think this is how that thing's going to happen. So let me, like, put my little razzle dazzle on it, and then the thing's going to happen. God's promise was fulfilled. All is well. But all is not really well. Abraham, on the other hand, hears what God says, and no matter how unconventional it sounds, he trusts God. He does it. And God shows up right in the nick of time. And everything is well. So I think that's how they point us back to God.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I don't have much to add to it, except that Abraham reminds me of Jesus, in that when Jesus was going to be crucified, he did petition to God. He was like, I don't want to do this. He's like, if there's any way that this cup can pass from me, that would be great. But then he says, but not my will, yours be done. And to me, Abraham is similar in that spirit of, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it because it's not my will, it's yours to be done. And that was the character, the behavior that he showed when he was supposed to sacrifice his son. He did not want to sacrifice his son. He loved his son, but he got up, you know, he saddled his donkey or whatever he had.
Idiot.
He got his son, you know, they went on a 3-day trek, okay? Ooh. So that's 3 days of knowing what's going to happen.
Bonding.
That's,
talking.
Bonding with his son.
Making memories. They're on a road trip.
Noticing all the good things about him, being like, oh, he's such a good son, you know? Yeah. And then having to go through with what he believes God is telling him to do. I mean, that is some courage and submission that I don't know.
Abraham was different.
He's built different. He's built different. So, yeah, I think that's how these two point us to Jesus. And we want to thank you for being here with us. And we hope that you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
God bless you.
God bless. Bye.